Hi, Sonja.
Hi, Tia. Pleasure to be here talking to you.
Oh, I'm so excited. Very, very excited to have you. So, I would like to start off by understanding what put you specifically on this path to happiness. You have been researching it, you are an expert, your books, just all your scholarly work. What was that point that, had you take this path compared to many others that you could have gone on?
It was actually serendipitous. When I went to grad school to get my PhD in psychology. The very first day of graduate school, this is at Stanford University, I met with my advisor. His name is Lee Ross, and he is one of the world's experts on conflict and negotiation. So, like, kind of like the opposite of happiness.
Yeah.
But the very first time we talked, we walked around campus, and I don't know who raised it first, probably him. He said, like, what do you think is the secret to happiness? And why do you think some people are happier than others? And so we ended up having a really long conversation about that. And then I started looking up into the research. And back then, this was in 1989, so more than
Yes.
30 years ago. There's only one person named Ed Diener studying happiness. And yeah, he called it subjective well-being, and that term is still stuck, kind of the scientific term for happiness. And so that's where it started.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great story. And wow, think about the explosion that has happened since 1989 and continues to. So one of the parts that we connected on before was there's so much to human happiness, right? Or subjective well-being. But you wrote to me the key to happiness and you put connection. And of course, there's even like the book that just came out, The Good Life, from the Harvard grant study, of just this idea that it is about human connection. And so from your perspective, can you share with people what this actually means in everyday life of, people working full time, they have kids, they're busy, lots going on. Talk about this key to happiness being connection from your perspective and your research.
Well, first of all, it sounds like a cliche, right? Like connection is the key to happiness. Relationships are the key to happiness. But sometimes you have to spend decades of research to land on kind of a cliche, a finding that's sort of a cliche. But the way that I landed on it is that for the last like 20 years, my lab and I have been doing what we call happiness interventions or positive activity interventions, where we try to they're kind of like clinical trials, but instead of testing a new drug or a vaccine, we're testing whether particular strategies make people happy. Like, does expressing gratitude make people happy? And when you randomly assign some people to express gratitude and some might do something more neutral, does doing acts of kindness make people happy? And what I realized a few years ago is that almost anything that we have done and other people have done to try to make people happier works because it makes them feel more connected, right? So when you express gratitude to your mom, you feel more connected to your mom. And most gratitude letters are actually written to people. Sometimes you can, of course, express gratitude for your health or something kind of abstract, but it's almost always other people. And then when you do acts of kindness for other people, usually it's not anonymous, it's like actual person, or even when it's anonymous, you might imagine someone like receiving your gift or your charitable contribution. Anyway, so the last few years, we've been sort of focused on trying to understand, like, so maybe it's really like a sense of connection that matters. And of course, there's lots of research showing connection matters for both happiness and health. That's a whole other conversation about physical health. And how do you foster connection? You mentioned how people are busy and they have to balance a lot of things. And when I say connection, I don't mean like you have to spend 2 hours a day, cultivating this one particular relationship, right? There's so many different ways to foster connection. It could just be you smile at a person walking by you on the street and it makes you feel good. It makes you have the sense that like we're all kind of interdependent, like we're all humans on this planet. It could be, making a phone call to a friend. So there's many different ways to foster that sense of connection that don't all take a lot of time.
Yeah. It's just like thinking about from the moment you wake up until you go to bed, right? There's all of these opportunities for moments. And of course, so many people are feeling isolated. There's this talk of like a lot of people are feeling lonely, right? Because, maybe they're not out walking on, if you're home, you're working all day and you're just on your computer and you don't have those moments, those micro moments, it sounds like causing the disconnection. So I like,
right. Although you can, of course, connect online and by texting and, research shows that connection is stronger when it's in person, but it's also pretty strong when it's not in person. In fact, we have a study that showed that phone calls and video calls were experienced as equally connecting as in person. So, which is surprising, but more connecting than like text or social media. So anything having to do with voice, actually, when you think about what do those three things have in common: in person, video, and phone, feels connecting. So yeah, so you can feel connected even when you're isolated at home, although I don't recommend that for too long periods. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting about the voice. Yeah. One of my friends has got me into the habit of, I send video messages. So sending a text, like on someone's birthday, I'll do a little 40-second video and people are like, oh my gosh, it comes across as more connecting. So
can I ask in this interview, what platform do you use for video messages?
I'll just use, I'll film a video on my iPhone and then I'll just text it. Or I sometimes will do videos through LinkedIn also. Maybe it's like a business contact that I haven't, I worked with 7 years ago, and be like, oh my gosh, we should catch up, that kind of thing.
That's such a great idea, because I usually my friends and I do audio messages like on WhatsApp, which makes it really easy to do audio. And at first it seemed like, well, why are we doing this? Should we just talk on the phone? But it turns out, again, we're all busy. And it's so much easier to, like, while you're driving, or I don't know, like getting ready for work or taking a walk, you leave a message, you have all your thoughts collected. And again, video I think is even better. And then, like, when I'm driving next, I listen to my friends. I have a friend, my best friend lives in Barcelona, which is far away, and the time difference makes it harder to talk. And then I listen to her messages, and it's so easy. And what's beautiful about that also is that you feel the person is really listening to the entire content, right? So if you want to leave lots of thoughts of something just happened, usually if I'm having a conversation, like, they'll interrupt for good reasons. They'll ask questions. They might be a tangent.
Yeah.
And this way I know they're going to listen to the whole thing. I listen to their whole message, and then I even take notes, and I'll respond to, anyway, I'm all for it. I think these are great ways to foster a sense of connection, and also to maintain friendships and relationships.
Yes. Yes. And a huge part for me. So I am married, and I have 2 daughters that are 6 and 8. For me, a key aspect of connection, or I'd say a tool, is to be very intentional and conscious that your phone is away. It's very easy. Like, my husband and I will go out for dinner, date night, and I could be like, we're both on our phone, maybe checking, and I'm like, oh my God, no, put our phones away. And it's not like we're trying to just not talk to each other. It's just so ingrained in our lives. Or if I'm like playing Lego with my daughter, and I'm like, no, put my phone in the bedroom. Like, I'm just going to play Lego right now with her. But I find that you have to be very intentional, because it's easy to just have it glued. I don't know if you relate a little bit to that, but
absolutely.
And phones can make us feel disconnected, even when you're right there with someone you love.
Yeah, there's a nice study done by Liz Dunn at UBC, where she had people either have their phones on a table, like at a restaurant, at like a group dinner or dinners, versus like put them away, and people were happier sort of having dinner without their phones. So obviously the technology in the younger people really are so used to like embedding it completely into their life. So the phone doesn't have to be disconnecting. Obviously you're like sharing videos or music or something, or like, oh, look, I just found out something happened in the news, and you're sharing it. So it's not always disconnecting, but absolutely we need to have sort of that balance, and sometimes just be completely in the moment, completely be present for the other person. And I need to learn to do that myself better as well.
No, it's a constant struggle. So you also wrote about the importance of conversations specifically. Can you elaborate on that?
Exactly. Speaking about connection, sort of how do we connect most of the time? By talking to others. I mean, yes, you can connect by sitting next to each other and not saying, by touching, other ways, but usually it involves speech. And it usually involves conversation, even if it's by conversation, I would mean broadly, even like a very brief kind of social interaction where you're talking. And so we decided we should study conversations, because maybe conversations are kind of like the glue, the main like tool that you connect. And so there's a study that was done that showed that basically just having a 35-minute Zoom conversation with a stranger made people like a lot happier than they were before, which really surprised me, because I'm an extrovert. And if someone says to me, hey, do you want to have a Zoom conversation with a stranger today? I'd be like, I don't know, I'd rather do something else, right? But it turned out people on average, even like the introverts, felt happier, after having this conversation. So we're like, wow, so maybe just having a conversation with someone is like the ultimate happiness intervention. You don't have to express gratitude. You don't have to meditate, just converse. And other studies have shown that just talking to like your barista when you order coffee, as opposed to using like that mobile app, where you don't talk to anyone, makes people happier. Talking to strangers on a train makes people happier than if they're just sitting like reading or like not talking to anyone. And so again, I think it's a really important to study conversations as like the kind of, not the glue, but yeah, kind of like the tool that we use.
I like how you said the ultimate happiness. Yeah. And that connects with, us feeling connected. There's that, like the spiritual component, the physical component, relational, everything. I love that. So in you sent me a study when I was preparing for my TEDx talk, and I quoted it. I mean, I wanted to say so much, but you only have so much time. And I said, you said, and I quoted it, it takes a will and a proper way to successfully pursue happiness. And many people ask me about, I would say both, but I want to kind of start with the will piece of how do you keep choosing it? How do you keep choosing happiness for yourself, right? That will piece when there's needs, that your family needs you, or your boss is this, or all these different aspects that make life feel like a whirlwind, to choose it for yourself. And I feel like you have to keep choosing it when life knocks you down, or something happens with your child, or gosh, you got laid off, like all these thousands of people in the tech industry, or who knows, right? Life keeps throwing you challenges. I'd like to know, just from your perspective, how to choose it and how to keep choosing it.
I start with a caveat, which is that I don't want to imply that like everyone should be focused on happiness and be working on their happiness. Not everyone wants to. Some people think that they're happy enough. Some people think that, they don't want to be happier because happiness is associated with kind of looking at the world with rose-colored glasses, which we can talk about that as well. Some people think that they sort of do a cost-benefit analysis. Maybe the effort to become happier is not worth the kind of the benefit. So I'm only going to speak to those who really, really want to choose happiness, right? So the ones who really are motivated. That's where the will comes from. So first you have to be motivated, and I assume like your listeners are already motivated to become happier. So then how do you kind of maintain that motivation? Kind of like if you're motivated to lose weight or become more fit or to raise happy and healthy children, how do you kind of maintain that behavior or that habit? So the word habit, I think, is key. You have to kind of create a habit, and it could be every morning. I don't know, like it could be like everyone has like rituals, some kind of ritual that is very different for other people. Some people use an app. For some people have like a bracelet, and every time they look at the bracelet, it reminds them, I'm going to choose happiness today. Or you do a gratitude writing exercise in the morning, or you meditate, you do breath work, sort of whatever, you do yoga, whatever works for you. It involves kind of creating a ritual that you can maintain. And if you fall off the wagon, that's okay too, because you can just start it up again.
Yeah. So it sounds like that everyone needs reminders, right? Even the people who really want to and have that motivation, that you need that, whether it's like in your environment or with a daily action that you do, like a ritual that you do. And would you say, because of the way that our brain is wired, that it's easy to fall off the wagon? Like it's easy to go to, I guess I'm kind of want to hear your perspective, I guess, a little bit on like negativity bias of humans.
Yeah, I mean, we have a negativity bias, and it's useful because we do need to attend to kind of threats and dangers and concerns and things that might happen that are negative. So we don't want to be all positive all the time. So maybe that's why it takes sort of deliberate effort to kind of overcome it at times when it's appropriate. Like sometimes, like you have an exam coming up or something important, or your child is having a big problem, like you need to focus on that and be like healthily positive. You don't want to live under like positive illusions. But the habits are really hard to develop and maintain. Doesn't mean they're impossible. And there's lots of sort of research and books about that. One of my friends and colleagues, Tal Ben-Shahar, who's a happiness teacher, you may know.
Yes, I studied with him for a year.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah, he's so wonderful. What a coincidence. Maybe not such a coincidence. I remember hearing a talk of his in Mexico, and he talked about how, we all get up and like every morning we brush our teeth. Like every single person in this room brushed their teeth this morning. But if you go back ages, no one brushed their teeth, right? So how did we end up doing that? Like if we can brush our teeth every single morning, if we learn to do that and we pretty much never forget, doesn't that mean that we can also create lots of other habits that are, that are different? So that gives me optimism that it's possible, but it takes like effort. And I'm a runner, and I remember reading in a book that it takes 10 weeks to run like on a regular basis before it becomes like habit where you sort of don't think about it, you just get up and you do it. And I don't know if that's based on research or if that's just someone's sort of experience, but sometimes I keep that in mind. Like it takes a certain number of times, maybe it's 10 times or 50 times before you do something, and then it becomes a habit.
Yeah, the neural pathway is strong. I tried to create a meditation habit on my own for 4 years. I would meditate maybe once or twice a week, but I was like, I want to do it daily. And finally I hired a meditation coach, and she helped me create a habit. So now I do it every single morning. It's the first thing I do. But after 4 years of trying it on my own, I was like, I still really want this habit. I haven't, like in 4 years, if I haven't figured it out, I don't think I'm going to be able to. And
what was the secret? What was the secret?
Oh gosh. One, I think I invested in that, right? I paid her to be my coach. So I was like, okay, I'm investing money and time in that. I think that was it. She talked a lot about, okay, what time of day, like, and also of course the benefits of doing it. And she helped me connect to my future self very early on. I did this amazing meditation. I started crying, and it was like myself in 3 years. And just that because I've really been working on cultivating calm and inner peace as this journey I've been on over the last 18 months. And so that, and then also she taught me all these different types of meditations, and, there was an educational component about it too, which just understanding meditation from like, I guess, a student perspective, but I would say also like, I didn't want to let her down, like, I think there was a bit of that, like accountability,
public commitment, right? Investing. So yes, you're all these components you mentioned are all these supported by research, the importance of public commitment and like investing in something. So there's dissonance reduction that happens like, well, I've invested money and time, therefore I must care about this, right? It'll be kind of dissonant and there's also research on something called implementation intentions, which are basically if-then plans. Like if or when, you could call it like when I'm brushing my teeth, I will take my medicine, right? That's so people kind of use those for like medication, right? So when like you say, like when I get up, like with running for me, it's like I get up and I don't think about it, because if you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, I don't want to go, or I need to do this, and like put on my clothes, my shoes are right there. I just put them on right away without thinking about it. So so that's another feature of how to create a habit.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So there's so much research since you said 1989, which is unbelievable. What areas are you excited about right now? I guess when you think about, this year, and it's so cool that you have this lab and you get to do all these different, interventions and experiments, but what are you excited about? I guess you're kind of like the next frontier.
Well, we've already started talking about that connection and conversations. We have a study that we're going to do where we're going to look at whether conversations make people happy, but also just hanging out. So like, I love going to coffee shops and just working, or like hanging out, like sit, and there are other people in the coffee shop. I don't talk to them, but just the presence of other people makes me happy. So maybe just sort of hanging out also is happiness promoting. I'm excited about that. We're now also have a collaborator in Israel who studies listening and good listening, kind of high quality listening. Because when you think about like what makes for a good conversation, well, if you're a good listener, right? And when you make the other person feel understood, and they make you feel understood, like you're really hearing each other. So we're beginning to study that. So we're going to study that. That's exciting. And then finally, I have like a whole other line of research. I wanted to sort of jumpstart a field called psychedelic social psychology. So there's been a lot of psychedelic science is in the news a lot recently. When I started doing it 3 years ago, only 3 years ago, it was even then, it was still kind of like a little stigmatized. I mean, it still is, I guess, in some corners. And so I have a couple of papers about the effects of MDMA on social connection. So MDMA, otherwise known as Molly or ecstasy, is a substance that fosters really deep, like feelings of warmth and bonding, like feelings of love and connection. So it's a drug that can be used as a way, like to study how to
Mhm.
foster connection, kind of as a window into how connection can be fostered. And also maybe in practical context and applied context, people who are lonely or really feel disconnected or have social deficits, like they have mental health conditions
Yeah.
where they have social obstacles, might use the drug maybe once or a couple of times to sort of help them feel connected. And so it doesn't have to be on a regular, it could just be, maybe you just use it once, or
Yeah.
couples can use
It's
it.
almost like a
So
jump
I'm excited
start.
about.
Oh, that's super fascinating. Yes, yeah, you do hear about one more. Karen Guggenheim at the, the World Happiness Summit. Yeah, she said so many different people have been reaching out to her on, related to psychedelics and then the connection with happiness that she over the last few years, like there's definitely seems to be more and more people, yeah,
More
looking.
interest, absolutely. And it's not a panacea. So sometimes I worry that like now there's so many people who are like, oh, I'm gonna have like psychedelics are gonna solve all my problems. So obviously that's not gonna happen. But the key is like whenever you have an insight, like whether it's you take MDMA and you feel really close and loving and grateful and empathetic, and then you realize like, wow, I can do this, but I could feel this, I could do this myself, I don't need the
Yeah.
substance. Or you have an insight, like people take, a mind altering substance and they're like, oh, I have this insight that the important thing is love, or I really should focus more on my son who has a problem that I haven't been focusing on, or whatever it is, or I need to change my career. Of course, the key is not the insight, but it's actually putting it into practice, right?
And to
Like
do
we
it.
talked about creating a
Yes.
habit that changes you.
Oh, super valuable. Okay, so my last question is many, almost everyone. I usually work with corporations, but leaders, again, high stress, high pressure, juggling many things. People always ask me again about work-life balance, but about just like the level of stress. And so I wanted to ask you, for people listening, because it's a lot of the people listen who feel like they have a lot of stress all the time, from work, from kids, from marriage, from their family, economy, the news, everything. So what's your advice for people who are feeling chronically stressed?
Yeah, wow. I don't think I'm not really an expert on stress, but I think you mentioned a couple things in this conversation that is, I think, are very feasible, reasonable, effective solutions. And they're really things like meditation, right? There's certain strategies that people can learn that will at least help them reduce some of that stress, like meditation or exercise. But also, I guess one thing is just think about, and it depends kind of who you're talking about, because if you're, low, if you have like low socioeconomic status and you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from, and your kids maybe lack basic healthcare and safety needs, that is incredibly stressful, and we need to change society, right? We need to, there has to be systematic changes. And so I don't want to tell that person, oh, you should just meditate.
I'm talking about, the people working in a company that, needs are met.
Right. You're talking about like high powered.
Yeah.
And so then we want to think about like what ultimately makes us happy, makes us thrive, and makes us flourish. And some of us certainly, and I think I'm probably one of them, I'm kind of a workaholic. So like, are we just like too driven and ambitious, and maybe we should slow down, right? And we'll be happier. We certainly hear lots of stories of people who have slowed down and have gotten healthier and happier. On the other hand, there's nothing wrong. Like some of us are doing some of these individuals are probably doing amazing work, right?
And they love their work. Like I'm sure you.
Right, they love their work, so they don't want to slow down. But there probably are ways to somehow maybe slow down a little bit. I mean, that's kind of like how slow down 10%.
Right. Doesn't mean you need to like go on a sabbatical.
Right, exactly. Or take breaks, because people always say like, oh, I'll do those things when I retire, when I'm older. And that's, as we know, like not a great solution. First of all, like who knows, maybe it won't be as healthy when that time comes, So like retire now. One of my colleagues has an idea that because we're all living and working much longer, we should sort of have a retirement in middle age. We should take like 10 to 20 years off, like between, I don't know, like 40 and 60.
When you're strong and healthy
again. Right. While we're healthy and happy. And then we start working again, like, from like 60 to 80 on. So yeah, that sounds like an amazing idea to me. So yes, is there some way that we can actually reduce, again, start with 10%, reduce what we're doing by 10%. And I'm the first person who needs to take that advice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like Dan Harris, how he's like 10% happier. It's like slow down 10%. It's doable. And you also just talked about kind of just pausing and have like reflecting on like what makes me flourish. And if working all the time is working for you, then it is, right? It's this individual, but giving yourself permission to slow down a little and take breaks and to not feel like you're not as successful if you do so. Sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well,
Exactly.
Sonja, thank you so much. I wish I could keep talking to you, but this is the end of the show.
Yeah.
Everyone, go get all of Sonja's books, check out the research on her website. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Tia. Pleasure. Really fun questions. And this is such a great topic. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about it for hours as well if I had more hours in the day. Thank you. Thank you.
All good. Well, hopefully we can do it again in the future. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. All right. Bye.